Do we have some sort of an introduction that we want to make?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah, I gotta
And
go
you
for it.
and you are.
Computer, and we're recording.
All right,
Okay,
here we are.
here we are.
The initial episode.
We're the first go around.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, for sure. Do we have some sort of an introduction that we want to make?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah, I gotta go for it.
And you are.
Okay. Well, I'm Richard Waine, and welcome to Behind the Lens, where we're going to cover the behind the scenes life of some of your favorite photographers, retouchers, makeup artists, stylists, anybody that has anything to do with something visual and you know the names, we're going to cover it. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Mike Miville, another photographer. We're both based here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And like Richard said, we're going to dive into behind the scenes stuff for professional photographers. So should be fun.
This is going to be really cool because, as everybody knows, we are stuck inside. COVID-19 has literally rendered everybody absolutely stagnant. So Mike and I decided we are going to do something absolutely creative out of total boredom. So, Mike, why don't you kick us off? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up middle Pennsylvania, Williamsport area, and moved to Lancaster after college, which I went to college in Philadelphia, and went to college for graphic design, actually, not even photography, and had been living here in Lancaster. I got a job doing photo manipulation work with Photoshop because I've been using it since 1993, and had always had a camera in my hands ever since I was in like middle school. My dad gave me a camera, and I just kind of always had it. And so when I went to college, they accepted me for both photography and design, but they were like, "Your design is so good, like you should go make that your main subject." So I did that, and when I got the job, like I said, doing Photoshop manipulation work for a magazine called Clipper. And one thing led to another. Needed more creativity. Picked up a camera again. Was at a friend's wedding. Took some pictures. They loved them more than their own photographer. And I think that's how a lot of people start usually. It's the quintessential was at a friend's wedding, took some pictures story, and it snowballed from there. And I just decided that my creativity and graphic design that I learned in college, it kind of really lent itself to creating better photos. And so I kind of turned to my design background to help spur on my photography before I really knew more about like the background of like the details and stuff, like lighting and things like that. So I used that as kind of a crutch to kind of move myself forward. And I was working still for the magazine, and started a wedding family portrait business in 2002 or 3. And so I did that for, 14 years. I was working at the magazine and had a side hustle as wedding and portrait photographer for quite a while. I then moved on to another magazine called Fig, which was similar to Clipper, in which they worked with small businesses. When I was at Clipper, I was also I'd taken over the photo studio from another great photographer, Joel Weebner, and he had left. So I ran the studio for 10 years there, and moved over to Fig. Did all the photography for, when I started there, 7 different magazines. And when I left 3.5 years later, we had 5 magazines at that point that I was still shooting all of them. And and I kind of let weddings and portraits kind of go. And so when I left, I just switched over to commercial photography because I'd been basically doing that at Clipper and Fig for 14 years at that point.
Well, what kind of commercial
so here I
photography
am.
was that, though? What kind of commercial was that? What were you shooting?
Well, it was, we'll say, advertorial, whereas it was for advertisements, but it had like an editorial feel to it because we would shoot things that were had more of a story to it. So the magazine itself at Fig specifically was a bit more advertorial than editorial. Wasn't really like driven by like a long form story or an article. It was more like an advertisement, but that had a story to it without actual like words and stuff. So that's a lot of what I did there, but also it's a marketing agency. So I did a lot of marketing, creative, and branding photography as well for clients there too.
Did you have to come up with those concepts on your own? Were they presented by an art director?
Some of both. I had my hand in a little bit of creative input for some of that stuff. And sometimes it was an art director, sometimes it was designers. It was very collaborative, which I loved. I've always loved being collaborative in nature for all of my stuff. So, but yeah, it was, it really taught me a lot. I hadn't really worked with the stylists until that point. And once I was working with stylists, then I was hooked. It's just, so working with stylists is a whole other realm. And until you do it, you just don't know what you're missing, really.
Well, I mean, like all good things, they have to come to an end because you're no longer with any of the magazines. So how did that transition take place, and how did you end up where you are now?
I left, I gave notice and kind of I put some things together and just started marketing and branding myself. I mean, it's nowadays, as everybody knows, you can put things out on the web pretty quickly and easily. My wife does public relations and marketing, and she was able to help me suggest a lot of ways and avenues to promote myself. And she helped me write things for the website and things like that. So I was very lucky in that sense to have so much help from somebody on a constant basis.
Well, that's actually pretty much everybody. We have a great support system. It sounds like you've got a great support system at home.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. She's very supportive, and she actually left her job like 10 months ago and try to be supportive and help her with anything she needs to with her business and her own PR marketing agency work. So we are a household of entrepreneurs here.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I've never really taken part in that kind of a family, as it were. You know, my parents were teachers growing up, and, you know, my wife is a teacher. And so everything is very different in my household. So having entrepreneurs,
Gotcha.
You understand what each person's going through.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. My dad was an entrepreneur a couple times. He ended up like in the back end working for the government, but my mom was a teacher growing up as well. So I get you. I hear you. So let me hear your background.
Oh, I had a lot of other questions for you, but that's okay. I will give you because, you know, we're not done with you yet. You think you're just passing the ball here. That's not happening.
Let's hear your background, then we can move on.
All right. So years ago, I was dating a woman who had a young son who was a wrestler, high school wrestler. And I said, gee, wouldn't it be cool to have pictures of him for sentimental purposes? And so I said, all right, I'll go pick up a camera. And I had no idea what I was buying. It wasn't a DSLR. It wasn't anything. It was some cheesy, no-name camera. And my pictures stunk. I mean, they were terrible. And I did what every sane human being would do. You take to the University of YouTube. And I did all my research, and everybody was talking about this thing called a DSLR. And what on earth is a DSLR? So, you know, I went out and I bought myself a digital single lens reflex, and I bought my Nikon D3000. No, looking back on it, it seems like eons ago, but the truth of the matter is that was the beginning for me. And so I took to the worst conditions imaginable, with low light in a gymnasium, with low resolution camera, and no idea about lenses at all. And I just took the kit lens, the 18 to 55, and I went after it. And my pictures still stunk. They were terrible. So, of course, that the problem was, according to YouTube, that I had not enough light. So I did what any other right-minded person would do. I bought a speed light. Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's right.
Solving all problems.
Solving all problems. I bought a speed light and I started to shoot inside a gymnasium with a speed light and an 18 to 55 millimeter. So yeah, you can imagine the picture still stunk because I didn't have any idea on how to control light, and I still had no technical. One evening I was watching more YouTube videos, and I came across a video of the fellow who is now and became my mentor, Peter Hurley. For those that are unaware, I'm a commercial headshot and portrait photographer, and the reason why I jumped into that realm was because of a 2-hour Google Plus video that Peter had done. He was doing a Google Plus panel, and they recorded it, and I saw this guy, and he was a powder keg of energy, and he was magnetic. He was hysterical. For 2 hours, I laughed my rear end off, and I said, I have got to meet this guy. Now, coming from the financial world, I knew that if there was supposed to be any way to learn anything, you will find it at a conference. And like any other profession, photography has a conference. So I found, yeah, right, several. So I found my way to my first conference at Photo Plus, and I sat in on his talk, his demo. And once again, for an hour and a half, I laughed my rear end off. Absolutely laughed my rear end off. And the pictures were out of this world good, and I had no idea how he did it. So I found a way into a party that he was co-hosting with the F-Stoppers guys. It wasn't like I was uninvited, but I just managed to find my way there. And there he was. And with a rum and coke in hand, I sauntered up to him and I introduced myself. And he was like so warm, so inviting. He said, yeah, show me your photos. So I pulled out whatever I had on my cell phone, and like clockwork, man, you fucking suck. Yep. And without missing a beat, he threw that one at me, and it was so warm and endearing. But you know what? It was the beginning of a beautiful relationship, because from that point on, I told him, if I stink that badly, teach me. And he did. I joined the first iteration of his coaching platform called PH2 Pro, which is now called the Headshot Crew. And I learned and I learned and I learned, and I stunk and I made mistakes, but I learned. And, here we are many years later, and, it depends on who you ask, but I'd like to think I've come a long way.
Well, you don't stink anymore, so we'll say that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. So that's my sob story, but not really a sob story, because I think that I've had many victories over the years, and like anybody else, I've had my share of failures, and I continue to learn, and I'd be a fool if I didn't.
Oh yeah, I mean, learning. I tell everybody. I was teaching. I do a little bit of teaching sometimes, and I always tell people when I'm teaching them, I'm constantly learning. Like I don't ever stop. It's just I feel like I learn something every day.
Absolutely, you have to, because if you stop learning, you stop growing, and I'm not into the stagnation. Yeah. So I pretty much owe my entire photography career to Peter. Hands down.
Fantastic.
Of course, there are many other influences along the way, and there are plenty of people that have taught me something along the way. But the reason I shoot the way I shoot, and the reason why I have learned what I have learned, is because I caught a 2-hour video of Peter.
That's fantastic. Period. That's great. And it's good that you have a stepping off point that you can reference back to, of where you're and when and who. Absolutely. Helped you figure that out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you think about things like your workflow and your process, everybody's going to start at some place and you're going to realize this is not working for me. I've got to get better. And so you
Yeah.
end up talking to a whole lot of other people who have done this before, and they impart some knowledge and you make it part of your own. So
Yeah.
while you might say that I've learned pretty much everything from Peter, there are other people that have contributed to how and what I do. And I've
Mhm.
just taken it in my own direction. So while I have a similar look and aesthetic to Peter, it's very easy to see that our work is not the same.
Yeah. 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 I feel like a lot of my, the way that I like to create light on things, people, mostly portraits, when I'm doing that type of thing is based on, it's funny, it hit me a couple of years ago. I didn't know where I got it from, where the sense of style that I liked was.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that there were things out there that I liked, but my style wasn't that. Took me a while to figure that out. But we were in a museum, my wife and I, a couple of years ago, and we were walking through the museum, and we were looking at it, I was like, yes, I love this stuff because my mom used to bring me here when I was a kid, and like because she was a teacher, like I said, and her school used to have field trips to museums, so she'd always bring me along when I was like 4, 5, 6 years old, and she was a high school teacher.
Right.
So the one museum we used to go to, the Brandywine River Museum down in Brandywine Valley, near like Kennett Square area, PA, it's based around the Wyeth family. And we were walking through, and I was like looking at these pictures. I was like, I love that light on how he painted that guy, and I love the light on that. Turns out, like, that's where I get my like sense of loving my light, is from when I was an early child, like seeing that stuff. It had an impression on me, and it like clicked. I was like, oh my gosh,
But
this is where I got that from.
which is incredible, because I recall back
Yeah.
to a day in college where I got a D in art history. I had and that's not a lie. That's straight up. I got a D in art history. I think that's because I had no desire for it. But
It's all right. One of my buddies in college, we had a Photoshop class, and I swear he failed the Photoshop class. And then he got a job doing photo manipulation work with Photoshop.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But I guess that there becomes the difference between academics and practical
world
stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's very real world.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the nature of things. For me, it was all practical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. You were saying.
No, it's I just was. So you mostly do headshots. That's your thing. That's where you got it from Peter. Have you ever explored doing anything else? Or?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I don't really talk about it much, and I really don't advertise it at all. But I actually do some portraits, and I actually enjoy it because it makes me step outside of my comfort zone, which is it's not a great feeling, having almost no idea what you want to do or how you're going to do it, whereas some people just already know how they're going to achieve everything. However, the experimental idea, I mean, I just like playing with light.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to quote Peter one more time, and this was at his panel talk at Photo Plus when I met him, where he said, "It's my light. It's not your light. It's my light." And I said, well, yeah, it can't be my light. It's got to be your light, or vice versa, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to make it my own, right? And therein lies the entire rub: the styling, the light, how you see shadow density, how you see highlights. All of these things have to be owned by you. Yeah. And I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
That's why over the years I've not really focused as much on light, or maybe I shouldn't say it focused as much. I'm not as maybe interested isn't the word, but I'm focusing more on shadow density than I am on light. And I want to be very clear what that means. I mean, I do care about my light very much, but I also want to see how the shadows are affecting a face. And that's the same thing in portraits as it is in headshots. But
it's the same thing in products and food and everything else too.
I was going to ask you about that. So can you tell us how that affects, food and product and other genres that you do shoot?
Yeah, because I shoot a bit of everything. I shoot editorial, commercial, branding, food. But like I said, one person who had a big influence on me back in the day when I was learning was, I'd mentioned him already, Joel Weidner, who they had a wedding photography business for a long time, but he was the head of the photography studio Clipper when I came on, and he was only there for like 6 months, but it was 6 months of going on the road with him and shooting all this stuff. And he taught me a ton. One of the things he taught me was how to look at a picture and read the light and shadows on it. And one of the things that I try and impress upon people now is when you're looking at something and you're trying to figure out, if you say you like a photo and then you're trying to figure out what you like about it, always how to read the shadows and read the light and the transitions from light to shadow. Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it, long shadows? Is it short shadows? And, so I'm constantly reading that stuff and trying to figure out what I want to do with it to make that my light, and my shadows, honestly, because shadows are just as important as light on anything.
100%.
Yeah. So it's a constant like struggle in my head.
Is it a struggle though, or is it an exploration in just being Mike Miville creative?
Sometimes it's a struggle because I have something in my head that I want to do, and then I'll put it to the camera, and sometimes it just isn't what I had in my head, and then I have to like figure out how do I get to what I had in my head.
It's a little different when you're shooting food or product because they're not impatient, but shooting a real life client, that could be really interesting.
No, that's not true. Food is very impatient, my friend.
Well, then tell us. Go ahead, please.
When you're dealing with sauces that gel up and look plasticky, if you don't shoot them in time, no, you're talking. And if you're trying to get like splashes with drinks or anything like that, you've only got like split seconds to shoot it. So that's about as impatient as it gets. Well, you can talk somebody off a ledge if they're good enough at talking to people for portraits.
Right. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I know that you and I have talked quite a bit about that, and we've got some great things planned for this show going forward. And hopefully we're going to get some other food and beverage photographers on here to talk about why sauce goes flat and, things of that nature. But no, those are really interesting topics for people that really do want to pursue those genres. But what I really want to ask you is that if you weren't shooting products and you weren't shooting people and you weren't shooting food, what would you shoot? What would you rather be doing if you weren't doing any of those things?
What else is there? Products, people, and food. Oh man, if I wasn't shooting those.
Is there anything you ever wanted to explore? Let's put it that way. Something more in depth.
I shot a lot of landscape photography when I was starting out. I think that's just like everybody kind of does a little bit just to kind of like explore light a bit.
Explore your Ansel Adams.
Yeah. I've shot some car photography, but I would really like to explore that a bit more, I think. I like the motion aspect of it and be able to get stuff. I've seen some really cool stuff out there. And I always find that like any reflective surface is a challenge. So I like that challenge of shooting vehicles. Not only they're reflective and you're trying to like light it and, hide things, but also like if you're trying to get motion in it as well. I mean, there's just a lot going on that could be really cool to explore.
Sure.
What about you? Do you have anything else that you want to explore?
Yeah. It's the one thing that, well, let me put it this way. I started, as I said, with athletics, right? It was high school wrestling, and I kind of moved that outdoors a little bit more to football. There's one sport I could never photograph, which is lacrosse, and for the simple reason that I played it. So I'd end up coaching instead of photographing. So yeah, that's a bad sport for me to ever photograph. I mean, I could do it very well, I know, because I know the game. And when you know the game, you know where the action's going to take place. And that's great, having that intimate knowledge of the game, but I would still end up yelling at the players like a coach, and it wouldn't work very well for photography purposes.
Yeah.
But that being said, I would probably like to try my hand at food photography a little bit. Just
Okay.
yeah, because you know what, I like food, and you know
Yeah.
what, people eat with their eyes, much like in headshots or with product photography. And like I say, even with food photography, people will eat with their eyes. People are
Mm.
attracted to something visual. And if it's well presented, well, people are going to be more interested in it. And I like that. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
But I've never, ever, ever shot one frame of food.
Well, if you want a little lesson, I have a bunch to shoot tomorrow. So,
Yeah, we're going to have to do that virtually.
well, yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
can bring you up on monitor and you can watch what I'm doing.
Oh, that'd be fun.
I'm shooting a cookbook, and well, it took like a week to get the food in to make. It's crazy because currently, like you said, things are a little crazy and we're all stuck in our houses. But I was
Right.
able to talk my client into allowing me to not only create the food and prep it and style it to shoot it. So I'm like doing everything. When I had, we already shot some shots with a chef and a stylist and the
That's
creative
cool.
director. So now it's all on me at my house.
Well, you've got the
Myself.
time, don't you? You've got the time. You know, I find that food styling is an art in and of itself. I mean, I've seen the videos, I've seen other food photographers on other programs doing the work, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting. And I think that what they do is pure magic, but I don't know anything about it. And I think it's
Yeah.
kind of fun to watch. So there would be something I'd like to learn. I'd like to push
It's
the boundaries a little bit.
That's cool, man. Yeah, definitely. It's funny. I actually don't have a problem doing this because my mom was a home economics teacher,
Mhm.
so I have a background in foods a bit from her. I mean, she taught high school foods, so I kind of have an idea what I'm doing. So
Well, then you're
it
one up on
helps.
everybody else.
It helps. It's going to help tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure. So let me shift gears with you a little bit, Mike,
Sure.
because
Let's do it.
you've been around for a while. You've been in the photography industry for a while, and clearly
You
you've been
saying I've
very.
been around the block?
I'm saying that you got a few gray hairs.
Not the only one.
No, you are not. I am hiding the follically challenged head at the moment. I want to shift gears with you because you have been around the
Sure.
block and you've moved from magazine to magazine, and now you own a very successful commercial photography studio. So tell us a little bit about business for you. How do you go about getting it? How do you market yourself? What makes your studio so successful, and how did you build it to that point?
Well, it was successful until about 3 weeks ago.
Well, you know what? It's going to come back at some point. I have
It
no
will.
doubt.
It will. My wife and I just had this conversation. Like, we built our businesses once, we can do it again. But yeah, I think what I've done over the years is uh, not only tried to push the boundaries of my own um, uh, look and style for my photography, but I think you also have to, specifically when you're shooting anything where you're trying to market to other people, is you just have to kind of be genuine and nice and put yourself out there. I mean, I have a website, I have social media, just to let everybody know that I'm kind of still doing it. But I think I get most of my stuff through word of mouth. And even when I was doing weddings, I got most of my stuff through word of mouth. And I don't know, I feel like I get more stuff through word of mouth than literally anything else. I mean, I do get some inquiries through my website that people found off of just searching, and I've gotten a couple big accounts like that, but to get to actually like hook them then is a lot about just listening to the people, asking them questions, trying to figure out what what they actually need versus what you want to give them. It's kind of a fine balance of what you think they need to like make their business stand out versus what they actually think they need,
Right.
and kind of hearing them. And it's just those marketing tools. You know what Actually taking a marketing class is probably the best thing a photographer could do if you're going to market or like try to do commercial photography, because you need to understand how they're going to use the photos to market themselves,
Right.
and who their audience is and stuff like that. So, once you get past that, I mean, I hear people doing Facebook ads and Instagram ads, and I don't do a lot of that. I've been lucky and put myself in position to like actually like have lots of people around me that tend to recommend me. A lot of my designers still recommend me and use me for things, and I don't know. It's kind of what I do as
So
far as like getting
it sounds like
clients.
the predominantly, for your business anyway, it's
Mm-hmm.
predominantly word of mouth. Like you've built a really good reputation for yourself, and now people are just recommending you day after day.
Yeah, I've tried, and building that reputation, building that. I mean, it just goes to being a nice person. Yes, I create what I think is decent work. It's not the best. I look at other photographers and I'm just like, they blow me away, and I'm like, how? I don't even know how.
Well, that's
But
inspiration there.
it is, and I'm totally inspired by those people all the time. Hopefully, we can get some of them on the show.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think we're going to give it our best, and we
Yeah.
hope to entertain everybody with that.
What about you? Where do you get some of, like, do you do marketing? What kind of marketing stuff do you do, or how do you get your clients? Is it word of
So,
mouth?
yes, it's word of mouth, and it is pretty much a lot of investment in my website and Google. And so when I say investment, I've never really put money behind it. I don't do any advertising. I do put a couple of $100s, and I really say a couple of hundred because it's about $200 into one advertisement every year that yields me absolutely nothing. And the reason why I do that is because it's for my daughter, for the high
Mm.
school programs in her school,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I never have an expectation that I'm going to yield anything from it, but I do that for her. However, I don't put any real dollars behind advertising on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, Google ads. When you are in a smaller niche or a smaller market, it's not as necessary as if you're in a much more metropolitan area. So when you're in a New York City or a Chicago, an LA, that might be a bigger and better way to get seen. In
Yeah.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania, I've just put a lot of time and effort into my portfolio and into building up my website to be a place where I can present myself as the best solution to the problem.
Yeah.
I have consulted over the years with a couple of close colleagues who actually are quite proficient in sales and marketing. And I'm actually hoping to get them on this program so they can come and talk a little bit about what they do and how they do it and how they look at things, because it really did change my mind shift. And thanks to their guidance, I've actually tripled my revenue since I started
Wow.
working with them.
Wow,
So
dude, that's
that
awesome.
was huge. That was huge. And I don't say that lightly, because I walked into the entire thing with a total skeptical attitude. And
Yeah,
they'll
let's get
probably
them
tell you
on
about that.
soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the truth is that, I approached the whole thing skeptically. And the reason why I did is because I don't believe in putting money into something I can do myself.
Hmm.
But I couldn't do it myself because I didn't really have the knowledge. But on the other hand, I also have other friends and colleagues that have a very different approach and yet accomplishes a similar thing. So, and we're hoping to get them on too. So
Yeah.
I've got a lot of friends. I've made a lot of friends in the industry, and they have a lot of knowledge, and we're hoping to share that with you.
Yeah. I put a lot of, when I was first starting out, I still didn't put a lot into marketing back then. I put a lot, anytime I would put money into something, I felt like it was more like education, to be quite honest.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. We're always looking to be educated because there's always
Yeah.
somebody out there that knows more, can do it better, and more importantly, can show you how to do it.
Yeah. You said you looked at a lot of YouTube stuff when you were starting and stuff like that. Back when I started, because, you know, there wasn't really YouTube.
Wow, you've been at it a little while, Mike.
I mean, I think YouTube might have been there, but it wasn't like it is now.
Right.
It was a lot of like magazines, and I used to look at a lot of UK magazines because I just thought their style was so much better than a lot of the US magazines. So I used to like look at a lot of that, and podcasts were just starting out, and there was a podcast I used to listen to out of Germany.
Okay.
But other than that, I would like buy books and magazines on photography and just try stuff constantly.
Well, yeah, experimentation is how you get good at things, and that's the reality, right? It's not just experimentation; it's just trial and error. See what's working, see what's not, and just keep practicing and getting better at it.
Yeah.
With me, like I said, I built up my website, and what I discovered. So when I first started, I needed a website. I was very well aware I needed a website, and I had no capacity to build one, none. So I did what everybody was doing at the time, or at least the people that I was watching, and they were on Squarespace. So I went with Squarespace website, pretty much because I needed to put my picture somewhere. And that's it. I didn't have a clue how to run a website, not a clue. And so I put pictures up there. And as I learned more and I got better at working on my website, I realized that there were limitations on Squarespace, things that I could not do that I wanted to do in terms of customization, in terms of search, in terms of design. And so I started to teach myself how to code in HTML and CSS. And it was born totally out of necessity. That's it. Otherwise, I probably would be paying somebody to run the website right now, which for some people might actually be more beneficial. But for me, again, I don't want to pay somebody for something that I can do myself. And while I'm certainly not the best coder out there, I've gotten a lot done on my website, and I've pushed myself up the rankings because I know how to operate my website the way I want it to be run. That's not to say that I can't always improve it, but it is a large part of some of my success.
Yeah, that's great.
For sure. I'm sorry. I'm dry. I keep talking.
I know. Me too. I keep reaching for that glass.
Yeah, well,
water at the moment, right?
This is water here, and there's coffee over here. I'm double fisting today.
Soon I'm going to the beer.
Right. Well, we're almost there, Mike. I got a couple of more questions for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Where do you see yourself in about 5 to 10 years from creative aspect? Do you want to keep shooting? What is it that's in store for your business in about 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So about 6-7 months ago, I started leasing a studio space. And I really like the aspects of shooting in a studio. It just allows me to have a home base, shoot products and control the light better. And I do see eventually having a bigger studio in a few years. Maybe a little bit longer now with everything going on. But I think I like the control aspect. And although I do like being able to go out and photograph out and about,
Sure.
I don't know. I don't think I'll ever miss or I don't think I'll ever not want to do that. Just because I like my pictures to look different constantly. Like everything. I always want the next picture to be something new and different. If you look at my Instagram, it's just constantly different because that's what I enjoy. So I don't think that'll ever leave me, but I do like having a place to put my stuff, having a place to call my own, having a place to do that. I think it's a little bit more long-term of a solution for, doing products and things because my body's breaking down. I'm getting old. I'm not young anymore. So
Oh,
Not having to travel around with all my stuff all the time sounds wonderful.
it does, doesn't it?
So I foresee being more of a studio shooter eventually. Uh, you know, maybe not fully in 5 years, 10 years, maybe. I'll be, but I still like, and I'm trying to get back into shooting for some other magazines. I've shot for this one college alumni magazine, and I've been trying to dip my feet into some New York magazines and push my way up there a little bit. Although I know they don't pay real well, but I mean the exposure is really good. So I feel like that could help to drive the stuff I want to do in the future, like my studio. So what about you?
Well, I want to just kind of go back to something you said about how you
Oh, sure.
want every image to be different from picture to picture. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that showcases your versatility.
Yeah.
I think that's safe to say. Whereas with what I do, consistency is king,
Mm-hmm.
because more often than not, people want to know that I can get the job done consistently, whether it's from a single human being in my studio to an office of 100 people. Will they all look like a unified team? So it's a little
Sure.
bit different in my genre.
Absolutely.
And that's cool. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop pushing boundaries and start, and stop doing things differently. I want to do things that push me out of my comfort zone. But from a headshot perspective, consistency is where it's at.
Yep. No,
Um,
absolutely.
that of course, 5 to 10 years down the road, I really do hope to still be doing this, provided my body holds up. But it's really funny that you mentioned that whole body thing, because my daughter's going to Pitt in the fall,
Mm.
University of Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And we're really proud of her for all the
That's
work she's
fantastic.
done.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Now, with her, on the other hand, she needed a headshot for her student ID. And it just so happened that the last human thing I did before we were quarantined was a location shoot, which means that I had all of my gear in my house, all of it. I've got everything here. So I was asked to take a headshot of her last night. So if you can imagine what I take on location, it's not exactly, a bag of gear. I mean, I've got what my wife has affectionately called my coffin, or my casket, I should say, my casket. It's the Production Manager 50 by Think Tank. It's massive, very, very large bag. And I had to take that downstairs into the basement because this is my home office and I could not do that in here.
Yeah.
And all of the other gear. And I had to set it all up, I kid you not, for about a 15-minute photo shoot and then bring it back up. So that was all sorts of enjoyable. So when we talk about lightening the gear, I would like to lighten the load a little bit. So I'm always looking to do that. And hopefully some of the people that we have on in coming weeks and months will be able to talk to us about some product innovations that will make our lives a little easier, because I, much like you, am not getting any younger.
I will tell you, I just came across and bought two new lights recently that solved that problem a little bit.
Yeah, tell us about those, because we were going to talk about some gear, so go for it.
Yeah, just real quick on that. They're Flashpoint, which is it's an offshoot of Godox, from what I understand. I don't really know a ton about either of the companies, but I had gotten a reference for them off from another friend of ours, and what I bought was the Flashpoint 200 or Evolve 200 Pros, and they're 200-watt flashes, but they're not really flashes. They're like a hybrid flash strobe head, and you can switch the head of it. So you just, sorry about that, audio.
We're having audio difficulties at this point.
I move a lot, and when I'm not,
I'm usually the one that does that.
So the flash head, like you can shift it and it just pops off, and then you can put on a strobe head onto it. The nice thing is that you can sync up to, I don't know, a bunch of them, and then they have a couple different things you just put on top of your camera that you can fire away with, and you can read it right on there what the setting is on each flash, change the exposure of the flash, But the nice thing is they make a few different power range ranges of flashes and strobes, and you can control all of them. Say you've got several different ones, you can control them all from that one little unit. The nice thing that I found is that they are like half the price of like pro photo stuff. But the ones I got, I don't know, they weigh like a pound and a half. They're like just slightly larger than a regular flash, like what is it, a Canon 600EX or something. Just slightly larger than that. But they have so many accessories and stuff that come with them, and they're all small and like easy to use and swap out. And I was able to fit 2 of those with all of the accessories in an old backpack I had. So that like lightened my load like so much, because I was carrying like these big giant, strobe heads, and they're heavy and they're like, double the price. And, to go to these things that are so much smaller and lighter, got me excited. They also have high speed sync, so you can shoot with them outside, which I do a lot, especially for portraits. So I was able to, really think about things that I can do shooting outside. It works really well for me when I'm shooting like editorial stuff or portrait sessions and stuff like that, or editorial portraits. I haven't really used them for food yet, but I just got them recently, so I'm interested to try them on products and food. They shouldn't look really that much different than a regular strobe, but
so let's go into some deeper gear here. Canon, Nikon, Sony, who's your flavor?
So I tell people, because I get this question a lot. I mean, everybody's like, what camera should I get? What should I upgrade to? And I always tell them, go to a store, pick up a few different cameras, and figure out which one speaks to you. I personally shoot Canon, but I've been shooting Canon since I was in like middle school, and their buttons and menus, I'm just so used to them that I could never switch. I just couldn't. I have been thinking about Sony recently, but I don't really have the time to figure out a whole other system. So I'm just sticking with Canon for now. And they have a lot of great glass, and I just put my money, invest in that. So, I mean, I'm a Canon shooter, but I tell people, all these major camera companies, they all make stuff that shoots great. So like, pick whatever works best for you.
When I started shooting, I was looking at a Canon and a Nikon, and I really had no idea what the differences were. So I, much like you recommended, looked at the operating system, and I checked out what seemed simpler to me, because I was a novice. I had no idea what I was looking at anyway. And it just seemed more intuitive for me, which is how I ended up in Nikon's system. And I just kept putting money in. Oh, there was me hitting the glass. I put money into the Nikon system, and that's plenty of glass and plenty of camera bodies. And now I have such a heavy investment in Nikon that it's kind of cost prohibitive to switch. It would probably take something pretty big in order to get me to move over.
I hear you. Yeah. That is actually why I was looking at the Sonys, because I've been shooting a lot of video in the past couple of years, and their video side of things is really good, actually. But it's just learning that whole menu system. I don't have time.
Right. Exactly. I did once pick up a Sony. I say that once. And not that it was not impressive. It certainly was. But learning it would have taken a lot of time for me to do that. And that's just not something that I really want to spend the time doing.
Yep. I hear you. I mean, I don't know much about Nikons. I know that everything you do on a Nikon is backwards from a Canon. That's about as much as I know. They take great pictures. I mean, it's technically not the camera; it's the person behind the camera. So I don't really even gonna give it that. Like the quality seems great. I'll put it that way. But I mean, I don't know. I wish Canon would come out with some. I heard they're coming out with like a really good mirrorless camera soon to replace the 5D system. So we'll see. And maybe I'll switch over to mirrorless. But at this point, I just can't switch over to Sony for a mirrorless if I need to take the time to learn a whole new system.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because last August, my wife and I went on an anniversary trip to Europe. And I said, I really would love a travel camera because everything is so chunky, the big DSLRs. So I bought myself the Nikon Z7, which I'm actually recording on right now. So I'm actually using it for video. And it's super light and it's really intuitive. Same kind of menus. Feels a little different, I admit that. But yeah, I kind of like it. I would recommend that.
Same thing. I did the same thing like 2 years ago. I bought a little tiny Canon Micro Four Thirds or something. I don't know. It's like a little squashed flat camera. It's like
it's squashed flat. Nice.
But it has interchangeable lenses on it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted something for travel too.
This is a mirrorless. This is the mirrorless system.
Yeah. Mine's the M6 is what I got. Canon M6.
Yeah, I mean, everybody said you want to go with lower resolution for a video, but the truth of the matter is that everything I do is high resolution anyway. And if I'm going to use this camera out in the field when I'm on location, when I'm doing my work with clients, I want to have that Z7, and it just so happens that it's doing pretty well with the video.
Yeah, no, it looks good.
So let's talk for a quick second. We talked about camera systems. We talked about lenses a little bit. We talked a little bit about your strobes. Do you ever shoot constant light, continuous light?
Mostly only when I'm shooting video. I didn't even start out with that. I mean, I did to a point, a little bit. When I was at Clipper, we had some constant light soft boxes in our studio.
Mm-hmm.
They were hot, dude. Like,
really?
It was what were we using for bulbs back then? They were
tungstens, probably, right?
Tungsten, yeah, tungstens or halogens. And I gotta be honest, they were like you couldn't have them on for very long. You'd have to like turn them off, set up what you were doing, turn them back on.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't shoot that's back in the day why people started trying to figure out like recipes to make fake ice cream and stuff like that, because it would just melt in like seconds.
Oh yeah.
Because those things were so hot. But nowadays, I mean, I have what's lighting me right now is an Aperture 120D Mark II. And I really like it for doing video stuff, but I'm so used to the power output on a strobe that if I want to be able to push a higher aperture range, I can do that much easier with a strobe because I can get more power out of it than I can a continuous light. So that's why I tend to not shoot with them, and I don't tend to shoot on I'm like opposite of you. I know you love to shoot on your tripods. I'm not a tripod shooter that much. I try to push myself to do it all the time, and then I end up just like getting frustrated and taking it off and doing it by hand anyway. So, strobes allow me to shoot with a higher shutter speed. So it's just how I've been doing it for a long time, and it's tough to break that cycle. What about you? Shoot with mostly continuous light, right?
Yeah. I fell into well, first of all, I didn't really fall into it, and maybe I shouldn't say that. Peter Hurley designed the Westcott Flex Kit, and I worked with these lights on a cruise that the Headshot crew had gone on. We were looking for something to do together, right, as a big group, and we ended up on a cruise ship, and it was the first time I'd ever used the Flex Kit, and I said, "That's it, I'm buying them." And it changed my life. Up until that point, I was shooting strobes, and I didn't need anything that was so high powered or anything. I was using Alien Bs and Einsteins.
Yeah.
But the Flex Kit has changed my life because now I can see exactly what the light is doing on a face. And that's really important for what I do. Yeah. They really are beautiful. They're daylight balanced. I have the first iteration of the Flex Kit, and they've come out and made some incredible advancements to them. But these are really fantastic. You don't need much power, and you can get beautiful soft light on people, which I really do love. And they come apart easily. If I really wanted to disassemble them, I just take the cine frames apart, and they're easy to disassemble, take off the light. I could roll them up if I chose. I leave them assembled though. But given the fact that I illuminate my subject with a continuous light and then I use strobes on the background, because either I'm shooting white, gray, black, and if I want to illuminate a color, I can do that. I can play. I have some flexibility there. I tend not to do headshots outside, even though people really, some people gravitate towards them. It's really not my aesthetic. Can I do them? Sure. It's just not something I prefer to do. And I will show people the work that I want to be hired for.
Just out of curiosity, why do you shoot strobes in the background and not continuous light?
Because with a strobe, I can blow out a white background easier, and I have a little bit more control. I can lower the power or turn off the lights altogether and get either a light gray or a dark gray. I can use the inverse square law and turn a background black.
Yep.
I do have plenty of flexibility with the strobes, and I'm always looking for a nice smooth background. So that's always not a challenge, but it's always an advantage.
Cool.
Tell me a little bit more, Mike. What other gear would you recommend, or do you have? Never mind gear. Let's move on. Do you have any parting words to your fans, clients? Well, you have raving fans here, but I guess what I'm looking for is some parting words from you that may be inspirational, people that are just coming up, people that have already experienced what it's like to be a photographer or a visual artist. What would you tell them from where your experiences lie?
I mean, I feel like education is always key. I feel like never, ever feel like you're too big to stop learning. This profession is constantly evolving, and because of that, it allows you to evolve your craft, change, be different, see other things in a different way, maybe. And, the gear is constantly evolving. So that allows you to try new things as well. And, there's just so much education that can go into these, to go into this profession that, don't ever think that, because somebody's teaching that they're not learning either. I've taught plenty of times. I've hosted classes. I've given speeches. And like I said earlier, I still, am constantly learning and still use that as my driving force. Is what else can I learn? How can I get better?
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I guess my parting shots would be this. Whether you are a novice photographer or an experienced photographer, whether you're pro or an amateur and anything in between, if you are in the business of photography or video for that matter, learn how to do business, study business, because I don't think it would come as a surprise that visual artists are notoriously bad business people.
That's true.
It is, unfortunately. And so my advice is to learn how to conduct business, because if you are in it purely for the art of it, then you're a hobbyist that really enjoys it. But income will go up and it'll go down and it'll go up and it'll go down. But the goal is to keep a sustainable business so that we can weather storms like COVID-19, right? Yeah. So we can stay in business and keep doing what we love to do. But yeah, you got to learn. You got to learn the business end of things, the marketing side of things. And yes, keep pushing your craft, learn more, and practice, a lot of practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
cool.
Those are my parting shots, my friend.
Great. That was awesome. Well, hopefully the next time we are on here, we will have a guest, and that will be what we look to do going forward, unless we see something in the, in the news of our profession that maybe something we could talk about for a little bit. But otherwise, we're going to look to have guests on, and we've got a who's who list of people we would like.
Oh boy! If you know any of these people, we have a nice sized list of people that we think can bring you something special in the way of knowledge, inspiration, and definitely
Yep.
some people you want to hear from.
Absolutely. Yeah. So stay tuned, and hopefully we'll bring somebody on here that you're looking to hear from.
And if there is somebody you want to hear from, drop us a comment, let us know, and we will do our best to get them on so you can hear from them directly.
Absolutely.
So, guys, thanks so much for watching. And Mike, thanks for dumping your mic again.
I got to get a better stand for this thing.
That's all right. That's all right. You know what? It's authenticity, and we love it.
I literally have a blue microphone sitting on a camera.
All right. So Mike needs an investment in gear at this point, and well, Mike needs another job to come out of COVID-19, get a job so he can go ahead and put a microphone on his desk.
Exactly.
Well, guys, for Behind the Lens, thanks so much. I'm Richard Waine, and
I'm
you
Mike
are
Miville.
that's Mike Miville. I'm going to step on your toes again. Say your name again.
Yes, and I'm Mike Miville.
And where can people find you, Mike?
It's mmivillevisuals.com. That's mmivillevisuals.com.
And what social handles do you have?
On Instagram, it's mmiville_visuals. And Facebook is just mmiville visuals on Facebook as well.
That's awesome. And we're going to link to those social accounts at the bottom in the description below. You can find me at www.richardwaine.com. That's Richard, WAINE.com. And on Instagram, I'm at Richard Waine, and Facebook, Richard Waine Photography. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.